Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game.
Woo!
It's Friday. So
Friday.
we are here. Last time we did a preview. This time we're back to doing a review. And so today we will be reviewing.
Oh, I need to pull up my video.
You don't have something yet, do you?
I do have it. No. I have something. We're gonna be talking about.
I knew it. It's gonna be a pyramid.
Pyramid.
We're reviewing the game show Pyramid. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we are reviewing
Seven Wonders Duel. Duel.
Duel. Yep.
I'm gonna use that later when we actually post this too. Just saying. But yeah, Seven Wonders Duel is basically one of the newer versions. Not that new. It came out a few years ago now, but newer version in the line of Seven Wonders, which is a very successful gateway game. Basically, that's really made drafting big, or it was really known for the drafting mechanic. And it was also known for being able to play up to 7 people. But Seven Wonders Duel is the version that came out a little later on that was made specifically for 2 players. So only 2 players can play this. And
you couldn't get 7 friends together to play.
Yeah,
Seven
it's
Wonders.
hard. It's hard. And then it plays in the box is 30 minutes, which I agree. That's a solid time for it. And yeah, so 2-player game in 7 minutes. And so right now I will do a very brief overview of how the game flows. And then we will start talking about the pros and cons, goods and bads. And so this is how the game looks set up. And so you have basically the players sitting on the left and right side. And then this game is already kind of progressed a bit. So both players have some cards gathered already, collected already. And then there's the military track at top, science tokens on top there, and the wonders that the players had initially drafted also. And then obviously the cards in the middle are basically the buildings in the game, which the main cards you're going to be drafting and playing with the rest of the game. And so the theme of the game is that you're basically both 2 people running your own empires, leading your own civilizations, trying to build buildings and wonders of the world to make your civilization the greatest. And so the way it'll flow is the game has 3 ages, so 3 different decks of cards. And so what's set up here is, I believe this is the first age.
No, second age.
Second age. Yeah, that's right. The number on the bottom.
And
the
shape.
Yeah, and so the way it works is for each age, you're going to take that specific deck of cards and you're going to follow a little, there's a little diagram of how you're supposed to randomly deal out the cards in this kind of splayed, staggered ways, slightly covering each other, some revealed, some rows not revealed. Mm-hmm. And then what's going to happen is on your turn, players are just going to take turns, alternating 1 action at a time. And basically every turn, you're going to draft a card from the middle. And so the cards can either be free, or they can have a small cost on it, or they can even have a symbol that you might need to be able to buy it. And then you're going to just add that card to your tableau, your place in front of you. And basically those cards, once you have them, will provide you what's written on the top of the card, the symbol up there. So it could be resources like bricks, stone, or once it could be these cards where if you get them, you immediately get a certain amount of money, or cards these green science cards that provide you with a certain science symbol, or victory points in that kind of laurel design there. And then basically gathering those kind of symbols or building those buildings, discovering that technology, giving you those symbols lets you then get cards that require that as payment, which are the smaller symbols on some of the cards, where you'll need to have that resource available on the turn that you want to get it. And so it's not going to give you resources as in like tokens or anything. It's literally just whether you have the symbols, enough symbols of that type on all the cards in front of you. And so players continue to draft. As you draft cards, the ones under it, once they're uncovered, will be flipped faced up. And then you do that until all the cards are gone. There are also red military cards, which when you draft them will move this. This is actually a 3D token, but this is from the top view. Will move this towards your opponent. And so basically there's 3 ways to win the game. You can either advance the military token all the way to your opponent's end, and you automatically win wherever the game is at that point. You can get science cards, which have different symbols. There's 7 different symbols. And then if you get 6 of the 7 different symbols, you automatically win a science victory. And then the last way is to play through all 3 ages, and you'll see who has the most victory points on all the cards, and according to the military track, and according to the wonders you built. Because on your turn, you can also, instead of drafting a card to keep, you can basically draft it and discard it to build a wonder if you have the resources that the wonder has. And the wonder is just kind of like a more powerful building, giving you more effects, which are on the right side of these wonders. And so, yeah, that's basically how the game will go until someone has a science victory, military victory, or I think it's economic or victory point victory at the end of the 3 ages.
Honor victory.
And so that's briefly how the game goes. And so what is good about the game?
Yeah. So I'll admit it has been a while since I played with Ben this game, but I do remember it being a very fun game. It is definitely very enjoyable. I had played Seven Wonders way before I had played Duel, and I am kind of a little bit rusty on how to play original Seven Wonders, but I do remember that one of the things that translated really nicely is this concept of the drafting, of how you alternate taking turns and having that sense of kind of choosing a draft and having the style of drafting between 2 players. Typically, if you do a draft with 2 players, it usually doesn't always turn out that great. For other games that are maybe balanced to have more players in a draft, like think of like Sushi Go or some other kinds of drafting style games, it's usually not as fun when they have 2 people doing a draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they tend to be better with more people. So I would definitely say when playing this one, the way that you have the stagger of each age having their special kind of unique shape. So I think age 1 is the like right side up pyramid shape. Age 2, as you saw in the picture that Ben was showing, is like the upside down kind of triangle shape. And then age 3 is this kind of funky other shape.
It's kind of like a diamond.
Like a diamond, but kind of not, because like the middle is like weirdly not, but something like that. But I definitely think like that concept of the way that you draft the cards, and then the fact that on your turn, by drafting the card, there are various options that you can use that card to do, which is, as we were mentioning before, you can build the card itself to put into your tableau of your kind of civilization as you're building. You can use it as kind of the framework for building your wonders, in the game, or it could be used as, I believe you can trade them as well for money, right? You can just do a straight trade to gain currency, because you need money a lot of the times to build these things, or to use money for trading for resources to be able to build certain cards as well, right? To get the resources you need to build. So I think there's a lot of different variety in how you use the cards, which is also really nice, because then it keeps this game pretty simple in that way too, right? For being a 2-player game, component wise, you're really not tracking too many different things. You're able to just, these are the cards that you need to use, and it keeps the flow of a 2-player paced game pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I think this kind of, the way it's set up in that staggered way, kind of like what you're getting at, really helps with making it a 2-player drafting game. Because obviously in like typical drafting games, original Seven Wonders, even like other ones like Tides of Time, Sushi Go, drafting is basically done with everyone having a hand of cards, keeping one, passing to the left or right. Where then in this way, like something I had heard maybe was that, or obviously experienced in playing this, was that it was so much smarter that they did it this way, because I think Seven Wonders original had a 2-player mode, which didn't have this kind of excitement with the drafting and stuff like that. So to purposely make a 2-player version that's a separate game, I think was a smart move by them,
Yeah.
so that they don't have to modify the rules so much just so the original game could be for 2 players. But the way that it's set up in each age in this kind of way is keeps it exciting, because like you're not just having a hand of cards where you see everything and you're going to keep one and keep passing to just the other player, but it's a setup where you could see a lot of the cards, like half of the cards, and then that helps you kind of plan a little bit of what you want to try to reach. It kind of avoids the issue when you are playing drafting games, especially if there's a lot of cards, of like trying to remember what was in your hand that you just passed to the other players, because that's how you can do better in drafting games. If you can kind of remember, like, oh, I'm going to take this card right now, but I know there's this other one that is in my hand, which will hopefully rotate back to me, right? Well, in this case, it avoids that kind of, could be kind of tiring for people to try to remember when playing that way. You can see half of the cards, but then part of the excitement is also that you don't see half of the cards.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where there's a little bit of luck, which is exciting, where it's like, will this flip over and be something that I want, or something that my only other opponent wants, or something that they want but they can't get, so then I can kind of take it, or and so I think that was a really smart way of doing the drafting.
Yeah, and kind of speaking to that, that's kind of where sometimes the excitement of a draft game comes into play, and it plays out really nicely because of the face down cards, but even also keeping some of them face up, because one of the things they could have done is like, why don't we just make all of them face down, which would, then it's just all random. And there's a certain sense of like, okay, it's all random, so then it really is kind of luck of the draw. But by actually leaving some of them open knowledge for both of the players to know, you can also start selecting cards in a certain way that kind of show that you might be interested in going a direction, but that gives the other player the information of, hey, it looks like you're interested in getting this card. So maybe I'm gonna figure how I'm picking up cards, so it's not gonna be revealed until it's in a way where only I will get it. So it prevents you from getting it, right? So it adds in a layer of strategy in your drafting picks that, in the traditional drafting sense, you kind of get because there is secret knowledge, but you don't get now, or like that now translates into this 2-player version, which again, only had 2 hands that were being passed back and forth. That's kind of hard to emulate or to kind of create in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can emphasize this enough. I think that is, for me, I would say like the smartest part of this design in this game, because again, with the visibility of the cards too, it does make me think again of like experiencing where, you're playing maybe with a few other people, drafting, and not even just trying to remember cards, but remembering cards that can combo together, It's like if you're playing with 4 people in a regular drafting game, you're gonna see 4 different hands each rotation, basically. And then it's like, can you remember the cards in each hand, and then also remember which ones will work together? Where then in this case, like again, what John was saying, like since there's just like half of it shown, half of it not shown, the part that's shown then gives both players the same information through the whole time, and then they can even start seeing, like, kind of guessing each other's plans of like, oh, I see there's like military here and here and here. It's like, is he going to try to get all 3 of these? Then I need to like maybe prepare for that in some way, And so I think, yeah, just that idea of like that both players are basically going to see the same thing the whole time is very interesting way of doing like the information in the game. And that is, I think that is an important point to mention too, that there is no hidden information in this game. Like all the wonders you can build are actually drafted in the beginning. Basically, I think it's the first player takes 1, you deal 4, first player takes 1, second player takes 2, then the first player takes the last one, and then it switches the order for the next 4. And so even the wonders that you can potentially build that are drafted in the beginning, that's shown to both players all the time. And so there's no hidden information. It's more just how you're going to outplan, outdraft, outset up your resources to beat your opponent.
Yeah.
Another point I guess we can go on to is, I think, well, this is a small point because I heard of this recently, was there are these symbols on the cards, like behind John's head, on some of these cards, there's like a white symbol, like that sword or that mask or that gear symbol on the green science card. And so this was kind of a cool design choice, graphic design choice, where I believe in the original Seven Wonders, basically there were buildings you can get in an earlier age, like a blacksmith or something, that then on a later ages card, the card will say under its cost, blacksmith, meaning if you have the blacksmith from before, then you can get that card for free without paying the regular cost. Where in this version, they basically simplified it to symbols that match, which I think is a smart design choice because again, matching symbols is easier than having to always read this word and see the name of the other card that maybe it applies to. And so, yeah, that symbol matching is also a cool little mechanic, which I guess is from the original, of being able to bypass buying things. And so it's a little smart way of giving players reasons to buy different buildings earlier on, because you might be like, oh, I just want these cards that give me resources, so then I can build up to buying things that cost more resources later. But then you can maybe save some turns by just getting a card that has a symbol that, I mean, maybe if you play it enough, you'll know which building it links to later. But even if you don't, there's that sense of like, this card could get me a free card later versus spending turns only getting resources to buy anything I need later.
And it's like that idea, for example, here, like in what I'm displaying here on the backdrop, where you have these 3 military buildings right here. So these 2 cost a resource in order to build them. This one doesn't cost any, so you can just get it straight away. But as we were saying, both of them that have a resource do have the potential linkage to something that comes up later, right, in another age. And so it's kind of that investment of, yeah, it costs a resource now, so it might be a little expensive now, but in the next age, the following building that's linked to it might cost 3 resources instead. So by being able to invest, in a sense, investing in this technology, investing in this cultural development first, or militaristic, right, in this particular case, or whatever it is, it's presenting you the opportunity as a civilization to grow. And I think from a thematic standpoint, there's a little bit of that nicety to it too, where obviously ancient civilizations, we know from historical records and stuff, typically specialized in certain areas of industry or areas of development. And so that is kind of a thematic link of how it builds in the concept of the game, that it's not just this arbitrary picture or arbitrary symbolic gestures, but that it's like a building that's linked to your infantry development could be like, for the next age, the advancement of that military or the advancement of that style, right, within the civilization. So then it kind of carries a little bit of a historic feel to it, where it's like, I am building a civilization of a really strong military, industry, which is also linked to book learning, right? So we're really smart, we're smart swordsmen or something. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm just horse people. We're a bunch of cavalry horse people, right? And we don't have culture because culture sucks. We're gonna tear down your civilizations, right? As you maybe then direct yourself toward military, right? And I think that's kind of the fun that you get out of this theme as you're playing this drafting style. Because then you're also seeing what your opponent is doing, and it's like, are there ways that I can pseudo-sabotage your advancements by taking technology buildings that would be beneficial to the other player, right? Or letting them do that, because you're like, yeah, you can do that, but my industry is way stronger than yours, or my military will be stronger later, right? That's kind of a nice, fun twist.
Speaking about the historic theme, you did a good job talking about it, John. It's like you studied history or something.
Yeah, something like an ancient history degree in an institution university, focusing on ancient Holy Roman Empire. No big.
I do think, kind of to add to both the options players have and what they buy, and maybe touching upon again like the way the drafting is done. Another smart thing I think is that each age you're not playing with all the cards in each deck. when you're setting up the age. You randomly leave out, I believe, 3 cards.
3 in each.
And so I think that's smart because that is a simple way, again, I mentioned before, of like adding that little bit of luck to your game, right? Where there's variety in the cards that can come up, and it's not like every time you play every age, every card is going to come up, you know? So there's a little bit of risk with what we were just speaking about, investing early. But at the same time, I think that's part of what gives the game like replayability, right? And it gives it a little excitement where you're trying your best to plan for the future with all this information in front of you, but you're not 100% sure if that one card that, I mean, you won't need it, I would say. You know, it's never like a make or break thing, but it is kind of, it can be a little disappointing when it's like, oh yeah, I just really want a card like that later, like this really strong military card that might be in the game. It's like, oh, that's one of the cards that was left out. So then you could still obviously go for military in different ways, but it's just not the way you want it to.
Nice.
And so then also with the Wonders, I do want to point out this was something that was interesting because as a mechanic of like kind of, well, the game is named after it. They are very powerful because as you can see, like the symbols on the right side of these cards, there's multiple symbols compared to the cards that you're normally drafting just have basically one symbol, one resource that it provides you with at a time. And so to build these Wonders, like they can make a really big difference. And I would say from my experience, the ones that I usually try to go for, like in choosing at the beginning of the game, that I'll be able to build during the game, are ones with that kind of cycle, that white circular symbol, cyclical symbol. I'm gonna mix those words up. But because once you build those, you get another turn immediately. And I don't know, that seems really powerful to me. I don't know if it's like I don't know if there actually is a balance issue with it. Because obviously, I mean, I would say I probably lost even though I chose to start with those. But it feels really powerful when you can like take a turn, build your Wonder, and that one gives you another turn. And you build another Wonder that gives you another turn. You know?
It's definitely a strategic thing, and it's one of those things that it's a very powerful tool when used correctly, because there's a lot of different ways you can think about how you use that. So one of the things we didn't mention too is that you can only have up to 7 Wonders built in total within within both tableaus. So once both players have built up to 7, or like 7 together, then whoever's the 8th one that isn't built is automatically discarded from the game.
Yeah,
so
the world just can't
one of the
handle
players
it.
will not get one of their Wonders.
The world
right?
can't contain 8.
Yeah. Otherwise, this game would be called 8 Wonders, and that doesn't work. The theme is broken. No, but and so like using the second turn, because one of the things you think about is how the game plays, right? So every turn you're taking a card from the draft pick to place. So if you get a second turn by taking a card, putting it here, building the building, and you get a second turn right away, that basically means you're taking 2 cards right away. And if you have multiple cyclicals, you can do more, right, at a row. So it's also a way in which you can, for example, as we were talking about previously, of sabotaging your opponent by taking a certain card that they may be trying to build and utilize, and you say, well, I don't want you to have it, but maybe I don't, maybe I can't build it, or maybe it's like it's kind of a waste for me to just take money from it. But if I use it to build my Wonder, and then it's hiding a card that I want to get to later, then it's setting me up perfectly for, not only can I get rid of my opponent's card, I can now take the card that I want, right? So, and I think that's a mechanic that's really nice too, where there are games, especially 2-player games, where if it's a move that's in a sense purely to spite the other player, right? It's kind of just more of an annoyance, because it's more of one of those situations in which it's like you're just trying to prevent me from ending or winning the game versus actually trying to win. But this mechanic allows it for, not only can you set the other player, but it's also a way you can set yourself up for building your own to actually drive toward being victorious. So it's not just a spite you from getting more points kind of card or play, which I appreciate a lot, because I am one who does not like people who just troll for the sake of trolling or being griefers. So,
which in the board game world, in this case, would be called hate drafting, right? Just drafting in spite of the other person to just be like, take it.
Yeah, fine. Just take the cards that I want, even though it does nothing for you.
Yeah. So it does. I mean, and actually, the situation you described, I mean, does happen quite often. In this game where it's like, because the important thing to know about when you're building your wonder is you are drafting a card, but you're sacrificing it, you're sacking it, you're not actually building it. You're just kind of, in a sense, using it as a foundation for the wonder you're actually building. And so
Yeah.
that card is essentially discarded without anyone getting the benefit of it. And so, yeah, so that's how it would work with the scenario you're talking about. You're basically sacking a card that maybe you think your opponent would want, and maybe one that you couldn't even afford. And then you get your wonder, and if you get another turn, you then get to pick another card, right? And the other thing about that, though, with why I think the getting another turn from a wonder is so powerful is because it throws off, that's actually in this base version of the game, it's the only way to throw off the pacing of the game, right?
Yeah.
Because normally, kind of like when you're playing games like, maybe I'm thinking the wrong game, like Solitaire or stuff like that, where you have this kind of pyramid setup of cards, and you can kind of count the number of turns for cards to be revealed, right? Going back and forth with the other player,
Or when
when
they'll
things
be
will be
revealed
taken
for
and
you.
eventually revealed, right? Whether it's cards that are hidden or even like the row after it. And so you can even count that out and kind of start planning like, okay, I know I'll be able to get this face up card in the second row because
Buy extra.
that's just the number of cards there are shown, right? If we go
Yeah.
one at a time. But then if you can throw off the pacing, then it can throw off plans like that, right? And that's why I think it's also very powerful. So that's from my own experience of why I think that's really powerful. And I don't know if that ability from the Wonders have is overpowered or not, because it actually does happen, like the case you're talking about where you use it at the wrong time, where it's like, oh, I can build the wonder and I feel good building it, maybe gives me a few victory points and the extra turn, but then that extra turn is like, I don't want any of the cards that are available to be drafted right now. So it's like, well, I don't know, I built my wonder, but now I'm getting an extra turn that I don't need and maybe wish I had later.
Or you have that extra turn where you're just drafting something that you really can't use, but it might reveal something for the other player no matter what you do. That lets them get a benefit out of the fact that you just took a second. That, and as you were saying, like in the way of throwing off the turn, that you actually now threw it off in a way that actually benefits the other player, which can happen too if you don't think about it, right? Or if you don't plan it correctly or accordingly. Or it's just the nature of a two-player, right? Like sometimes an action that you're going to take will have unintended for you unintended benefits to the other player, right? So you do have to think about whether it's worth that to do. Also keeping in mind though that there is a limitation to how many wonders you can build, because you could just hold on to it and then either A, get to the end of the third age and be like, oh, I never built it, or B, the other player builds all of theirs and then you're kind of stuck without being able to use the rest of your use all of your wonders, because that's a resource you have too, and now the other player has a better set than you do, right?
And that actually is a smart design too. I mean, that you mentioned the building of 7 wonders in total. I mean, not just because it matches the name, but that idea of like, yeah, I mean, the way you were just phrasing it now, right? It's not that you wouldn't be able to build any of your wonders if your opponent built their 4, right? Because each player only has 4 that they start with that they can potentially build. But it is the case of like, you can, if your opponent builds all 4, you're only left to build 3 of your 4, and it's like, which
And you're
one? I
behind.
mean, usually I don't think it's too hard of a decision of which one not to build, because maybe at that point it's like you already know what resources you have, and so you already kind of started planning way before of like, I mean, I'm probably not going to build this one because the resources it needs are way different than the other ones. But then there are times where if you got a draft at the very beginning of the game that you liked with your 4 wonders, then that's when it becomes harder. It's like, no, you built your
Or
4th one. That means I
yeah,
am stuck with
you're
just
stuck.
maybe
Or it's
building
like
3.
you're thinking of your strategy of like, I want to build all 4 because they will provide certain kinds of things that I'm looking forward to having. And then it's like, wait, I can't do that anymore, which means I have to cut one of them, and each one was pretty important, right? Or even the sense of like looking at even the tableau that I'm sharing right now. Let's say this player on this side, built all 4 wonders. Each of these wonders is worth direct points for the end of the game if we get there. And let's assume the bottom one does too. This side, if you look at it, only 2 of the 3 that are directly being displayed show victory points. So already this player, has more victory points from wonders alone that this player is just not going to be able to catch up with, right? In the sense of the fact that they're not going to be able to build all 4 of their buildings. So there's even a kind of that late game component concept to it as well, right?
And so then aside from these wonders and the cards that we draft, there, like we mentioned, there was the 3 ways to win. So this, I mean, kind of just touched upon victory points, which is kind of the most straightforward. After 3 ages, you see who has the most. And actually, just to show one of the components, game comes with score pad, paper sheets, plenty, and it's nice.
That much.
It's nicely like color coded with the actual symbols and the card types, so you can, it's easy to follow, you know, writing your score in. So this is nice to have, that it comes with the game. But then the other way of winning with the military victory up there, that track, that one actually seems like, I think I like it, but it's kind of interesting to describe because it's very simple, right? It's a tug of war where whoever's getting military cards are going to be pushing that military token towards the opponent's end. And there are those little bonuses that you get for pushing it to a certain extent, right? Like the first time that you get it to a certain extent, those tokens get taken off that John's pointing at, which, and that symbol means that opponent loses that much money at that time. Not continuously, just the moment you cross into that section. And so that's a small little bonus of adding to that track, but it's also thematic, right? You're basically attacking, and so they're losing resources as you're damaging them more, pillaging them more. And so it can be a fun little mechanic, but I like how it's not like the main mechanic, you know, like not the main way to win. It's just one of the 3 ways, because then it's always something you have to be aware of, right? Even if your opponent isn't planning to do it, all the cards are going to get drafted, right? And so people, whether you or your opponent, are going to end up with military cards, you know? And so that's automatically going to push it, whether you wanted to or not, right? And so if you don't go for military and your opponent's not even trying but has to end up drafting those cards, they're going to start coming towards you on the military track. And then you're going to have to spend later turns just to recover from it, to make sure you're not losing too much money or that it's not reaching the end of the board on your side and you lose instantly.
Yeah.
So I think that's cool.
It's cool, but you know, and maybe this is starting to shift into a little bit of the not so nice parts of the game. I was gonna say, I do agree that it is definitely a clever way of doing it. I don't know. Maybe this is more of a neutral than a negative per se to the game, but it does seem a little too simplistic of a tug of war style, and that it's so kind of one-sided in the way that you gain the points, right? And that's the only real direct conflict that occurs between players for a 2-player game. So that's why it's kind of a neutral point, because I do definitely think it's something that you should be tracking, and it is a way of being like, hey, don't forget, like, you are a civilization, you can be conquered, you can be destroyed, so you do have to be aware of it. But there are times where you play the game where sometimes it's like you do have another alternate strategy that's completely separate from it, and that the other player only starts gaining it purely by the virtue of the fact that it's just like there's really nothing else to do. And that's the part that seems a little bit, it kind of loses a little bit of that appeal to me from a thematic standpoint, where it's like,
I get what you're saying.
You're becoming militaristic because you have nothing better to do. Where it could become that, right? It could become
that.
Where that just seems, it seems a little bit faulty, right? In that sense.
I see what you're saying.
But I like, maybe it's just something like, and maybe expansions add it. Again, we haven't played any of those, and we'll be talking about those a little bit later. But it's just kind of like, what if there was something a little bit more to do that would affect it slightly, or at least, you know, alter it in some capacity? That might have been interesting, like putting a shield, right, in some way, where it's like the first time you get hit by a sword, it prevents a movement kind of card. right? That would have been an interesting consideration. Obviously, it would have added way more components. You would have added way more cards. The balancing would have changed completely. I don't know if that's the right solution, but it just, from my perspective, I did feel like military tended, personally, I actually found to feel pretty strong as a component because it's a combination of not only forcing a player to lose resources, but it's also a way of gaining points values, which is getting cards that you might already be using to gain points, but then getting additional just free points, right? So and that's one of the things that, as Ben was saying, though, it's like that's why you do need to watch out and be careful of it. So there is a strategic component to it, which is why I don't think it's a. That's why I'm not saying it's a negative aspect of this game, in my opinion. It's more of a neutral aspect, in my opinion. So,
and then
I also like conquering things, so I like it when there's more fun in like actually conquering stuff.
But
But
yeah,
this
so
is
that
also
is
not quite a war game, which is
yeah,
why I
yeah.
understand what Ben was saying and appreciate that, which is why it's more of a neutral than again.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a Euro game, right? That I mean, the original was a Euro game, meaning it's not a game of direct conflict, right? And so I guess this would be a way to have that sense, but not be all about conflict yet. And then the third way, the science victory path, that's my favorite actually, which I have pulled off before. It actually seems pretty hard, but I have beat our friend Kelly a lot. So if Kelly, if you're watching this, yes,
You just got called
you
out.
know it. You know it. I just called her out, and I want everyone to know I'm better at leading a civilization. But no, the science victory though I do like because so it's with the green cards, and I mentioned in the rule like the green cards have symbols which are basically like scientific advancements, discoveries throughout the ages, thematically speaking, and so if you get there's 7 different symbols that'll show up among all the green cards in the game throughout all the ages, so you're not going to be able to win with science in the first age, which makes sense too because science didn't all just happen in one age. But then as you buy those cards, they generally don't provide you anything except maybe like symbols that could link to other cards, as we mentioned before. But then other than that, it provides you just the science symbol itself. And so you need 6 of the 7 different symbols to instantly win the game. And so that actually is a really tough goal because I think each symbol only shows up twice on cards. So you have to get if you're going for science, you have to try to get them right when they show up, or else you might lose your chance. Especially considering that again, each age doesn't use every card. So the random cards that could be left out of the deck for that gameplay could be the science card you want.
And that the other player gets to draft too. So you have to be very careful about how you set up choosing and selecting cards because they can choose it and just take it away by selling it for money.
But then a cool thing about the science symbol is I think the way that balances out to make it more of a strategy you kind of want to go for, whether you're gonna go for the victory itself or getting science cards themselves, is that when you get science cards with the same symbol, right? Basically both copies of that one symbol, you get to take one of the tokens from the top, one of the science tokens. And those are also randomly chosen at the beginning of the game. I think there's a lot of them in the game that are randomly chosen, like 10 or 12 or something. So you always set up 5 randomly. And then, so if you end up drawing your second version or second card of a given science symbol, you can choose any one of those tokens to get. And they basically give you a bonus instantly. Some of them I think might be
continuous.
Continuous, or they could be ways to score points at the end of the game. Like for example, that one up there is just 7 straight victory points at the end of the game. The one next to it is money and victory points, so you get the money at that time, and then you get victory points at the end. There's the pyramid one there, that is the pyramid. They all have names for what science they are, what development they are. That gives you another turn instantly, like that power we've been talking about on the Wonders. There's also there also is one, I think, Justice, which counts as an 8th science symbol. Doesn't give any other bonus, but it counts towards the 6
science
out of
victory.
the 7 that you need. So it's a 8th symbol that you can count. So it's
Not
cool when you
following
can
the
get
7 theme. I don't like it.
And so those are pretty cool. I think, like I'm saying, the reason I'm pointing this out is because it makes you still want to get the science cards, even though you might not be going for a science victory, right? Because since it sounds so hard to do the victory, which it is, there's still a way to get a bonus for it, of getting science tokens, which can give you powers. So, yeah, I don't know how you feel about the science victory path or science cards.
Oh,
You hate science though, right?
From a gameplay standpoint, it's definitely the hardest one. I think it's not strong enough to be an easy, like something you should consistently go for personally. I just feel like it's one of those things that, like, if you happen to realize, wait a minute, I've got 4 of the 7 symbols. Maybe I can just win if I get 2 more, right? It's kind of one of those, you just kind of realize it. And again, I think it's for a lot of the reasons of it's very easy to see the other player has an amount of sign symbols accruing. So you can, like, the other player can start planning for it. It does throw their turns off, probably. Like, it will throw their turns off, but I also feel like it's the easiest of the victory achievements to throw off. Personally. So, and that's why, like, from that standpoint, it's again, it's kind of like the military one, but I feel like it fits slightly better with, like, the Euro theme of more of the, if you're not careful, this guy's going to advance in a scientific way beyond your civilization, which kind of fits more the building mechanic and the building theme of your civilization. So, yeah. So that's where I kind of feel about it. I don't think I've done a science victory, but I also don't think I've ever really tried to, because I just feel like it's the most RNG of all of the victories. Between the 3 victories, it's definitely the hardest one to achieve easily, unless, again, the justice token is on top. It does make a lot easier if the justice token is in the game. But once again, to get the justice token, if someone's going to get that token, it's pretty clear what they're going to be trying to aim for, because there's really no other reason to take that token other than the science victory. So
science
words of
victory.
wisdom for strategy people.
So science victory is just a little better than military for you, and military is neutral.
It just fits a little bit better. To me, it's also kind of just like it's a fun mechanic, and it does add a variation into the game. And it's something that is worth doing for a combination of getting these extra symbols to make future buildings, and the fact that the thing though to me is, like, you're usually taking 2 symbols, right? You have to take 2 different drafting turns to get one of those symbols. So whatever you're getting better be worth it, is kind of the thought process I have, right? So
I mean, I just wanted to.
That's my take.
I mean, I just want to point that out because I'm wondering if you have a lot of negatives now that we're going to go on to the negatives of the game. I mean, I would say one of the negative. Oh, are you ready to jump in already?
No, you go first. You go first.
No, I mean, just the main one I would actually want to point out, which is interesting because John has been mentioning a lot about theme. And for me, I played the game a lot, and I feel like there isn't much theme in the game. Only actually when we're discussing now am I kind of realizing where the theme is. But then looking back on when I'm actually playing, it comes down so much to just the card colors, and the symbols at the top of the card, right? It's all just like symbol matching, color matching to know what I'm trying to do, And so when I'm actually playing, I mean, I like theme, but I personally don't feel it in this game. Unless I do talk about it kind of, bantering during the game, like, oh, look, I discovered this or something, or my military is coming for you, or, but other than that, it's like, I'm not going to read the name of my wonders that I'm building. I just know I'm going to put this card over here and get the icons on the side. So for me, actually, theme is a weak point of the game. But it's hard for me to fault it for that, in the sense that to make the game streamlined, right, with these kind of 3 different ways of winning and all these different categories of cards, like, I don't know, 5, 6 categories of cards, to make it play well and look nice with all symbols versus like words all over all the cards telling you what it does. Like,
components.
I think that the theme is what had to be sacrificed for that to kind of happen. But I don't know if you
And
have
it's
other
kind of like
thoughts.
it's a high level theme, and it's more because of the artwork. So I kind of agree, but that's also the sense I get with a lot of Euro games in general,
Mm,
where a lot of Euro games themes can be easily removed, and you can just
mm,
replace it with arbitrary items, arbitrary colors, arbitrary kind of
mm,
thoughts. And generally, in a lot of Euro games, right? Like
mm,
it,
mm,
they tend to be known that way, which is why, I think it's maybe just the forum in which this is, which is why I appreciate it a little bit more. But I've
mm.
kind of mentioned a little bit of my neutral negative on the battle
Wait, but
tracker.
did you have any thoughts on what I'm saying about the theme though, or do you actually like
I
the
think it makes
theme,
sense.
or you get the
I
feel?
think it makes sense. I think I'm in agreement with what you're saying. Ultimately, when we really get down to it, I think from an art standpoint, like if you take the time to read the details and look at the stuff, you can kind of see it coming together.
Mm,
But a lot of times when you're playing a game, it's not. Yeah, you're not thinking I'm getting the watchtower now. I have a watchtower in my, whatever, or I built the Colosseum and now I have a Colosseum in my thing, right? Like it doesn't. There's nothing other than like the direct symbol things that you get. It, it's flavor, right? It's a lot of flavor.
mm-hmm,
So to me, if it didn't have that flavor, the game would be would be really bland, and it
mm,
would be really hard to play a game like this if you didn't have
mm,
any thematic coloring to it.
mm,
But to the point of like, why is this temple give you 12 gold? Maybe that theme doesn't really fit. It's just really nice artwork that has that power,
mm,
right? It's kind of one of like it does become a slightly arbitrary, where I think there are some games where it's like the symbols do more directly match what you're getting out of it.
mm,
But yeah, so that's kind of like why I kind of agree with you on theme in that way. From if we're talking about how like if a game's theme also drives the activity as well, right? Why you're doing certain actions, like a game
mm,
we reviewed in the past, like Viticulture, has a much stronger theme that plays into the gameplay and it's part of the Euro style.
mm,
So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah, but I also think this is a two-player game. I don't think they wanted to invest a huge amount of money into a two-player game either. An economic aspect and business aspect to it too. So that's just my sense from a development standpoint. Negatives. I do think there's a certain sense that if you've played this game a lot of times, even though you get the variability of losing 3 cards, there is a certain point where you can kind of guess, right, what's coming and
Mm,
what is planned, what could be coming along the way. So you might lose some of the allure and the appeal of this game if you play it too often or too frequently over and over and over and over again, because it it doesn't, to me, it doesn't have enough variability, because the biggest part that should require the most variability would be the drafting sections, because
mm-hmm,
how the wonders can be drafted between like 12 or 14 different wonders. I forget how many there are. And
mm,
then between the 8, like the 10 or 12 tokens that you can get in the science tracker. But between both of those, they're not required aspects of gameplay, right? Those are things you can do. You technically don't have to do either of those.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So from the core play itself, this is where most of the expectations of variability come in. And
mm-hmm,
that would be kind of a potential negative of there really is only so many cards in the game. So if you keep playing it, there will be a point where like as we were saying, like this card will always lead to a card that only shows up in the third age or only shows
mm,
up in the second age, where when you get into that age, you can kind of figure out like whether or not that card is something you're going to continue using or not. And it
mm,
lets you immediately figure out what to do. So then it becomes more of just a playing your puzzle on your own. And that's actually where my second maybe negative is that as for a 2-player game, it is surprisingly non kind of competitive,
mm,
where there is the drafting, and we talked a lot about that, and that really is the only player dichotomy that you have with the other
mm,
player. Otherwise, everything you're doing here is for yourself, right? And for being a 2-player game, I would almost kind of wish there was a little bit more something that would be more directly impactful to the other player
mm,
than just I took a card that you wanted, or
mm,
I
okay.
changed the turn order for me to take a second card from you, right? or I'm pushing the military tracker, right? Which is also still based on the card taking. So there is a little bit of that because of the nature of the genre of two-player games, where I would say that could be a negative, that if I'm going to be going head to head with my friend, or the person I'm going to be playing with, because likely the person you're playing with, like if you're going to be playing a two-player game with this person, they're going to want to play and you're going to want to interact with each other in some way. This game doesn't have quite that same level of interaction as to some other games that are two-player, like one of the ones that we have previously reviewed, Exceed, where it's direct competition, and direct effects of how you're playing cards in relation to another player, which is kind of the appeal of two players sometimes. But even though that's my negative for it, that could actually be a positive for some people, because maybe you're looking for a two-player game that is not so combative or so directly confrontational. And then you kind of have this nice, like, you don't have to play a four-player game to get that experience of the point gathering style or Euro style of a game. So I guess maybe a negative in my opinion, because it's just the way I think about two-player, but maybe not for everybody.
You just want to beat down the other person if it's two-player.
I mean, why am I playing a two-player game with you otherwise? Unless it's a cooperative, which is a different discussion.
It's like you're thinking, it's like there's in a two-player game, there's just gonna be one winner and one loser.
It's either co-op or competitive, hardcore, no in betweens.
I mean, I would say, on that last point you were saying, I don't know if I would share that negative, because I think it's interesting when you do boil down a drafting game to two players. For me, even though it is indirect competition or interaction, it does have that tenseness, I feel, of still being like, yeah, like I'm building this and you took what I needed. And I know you described that as like kind of the only thing that really happens. But I think when I'm playing it, I do kind of get that sense of like, oof, like that kind of throws things off. So I have to rethink. Like there's an excitement for me with that, even though it's just that. And I will say that though, and this isn't to say negative either, maybe more neutral, that as you were pointing out, the drafting is the main mechanic. Like same with Seven Wonders, as I mentioned, which was kind of the gateway game that kind of solidified drafting as a big mechanic in board games. Like as with Seven Wonders and with this, like drafting is the mechanic. Like it's in a lot of later games and even say bigger games, drafting is one of the mechanics that you do, maybe at the start of a round, and then you move on to other stuff like worker placement, dice rolling, spending resources. Where these games, or Seven Wonders, the series of games, is all about drafting. And so I don't think that's a negative. I think, well, I never played the original Seven Wonders. I should have said that earlier. And I was kind of turned off by it back then when I learned about it, because it seemed like a big game with all these players and similar tokens, mechanics, parts of the game. It just seemed like a really elaborate game of drafting, So that's what kind of turned me off of the original. And so for me, it is nice that, shrinking it to two players and making it all about drafting, it makes more sense to me. And so that's why I would say I don't necessarily share that negative that you're pointing out. But I would say actually, and actually I do want to take a little time just to show the components, which I should have mentioned, I think are great. The box size is really great. It's actually a smaller size than most games like Splendor or other ones that we reviewed. So it's a good size, and I always love a game that has an insert that fits everything well. This is the military token that you can take out here, and then there's the military board and science token area that opens up, and then you have your pad for writing your score, and then the whole deck of wonders and the currency. And so I think component-wise it's good. Like John mentioned, like the art. I think the art's really good in this game. It's not a theme I actually care about, so that could be a negative on my end. I don't usually care about.
That's like your opinion.
It's a negative. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's not a theme that I'm usually into. And again, I even mentioned I didn't feel much of theme anyway. But the art is nice. Like when you have cards like the Wonders or even like the regular age cards, right? Like that's full art basically, except for the icons at the top, right? You know, it's not like this unnecessary border on the front side of the card, but that it's like the card is filled up. Like I think that's good. That's always a good sign that like they're displaying the full art of the card. And then even with like the track that I showed, right? It's like it's all the artwork with the obviously spaces and stuff with in dotted lines on it. But it's not just like it's not like a whole rectangle and a lot of empty space on it, you know. So art wise, I think it's great. Theme wise, I don't necessarily care. So I'm saying a positive and a negative.
Just the non-history major.
Yeah. So, but I don't know if you had any other negative. Actually, one negative I did want to mention because I did mention this a lot. The power of getting another turn. One thing I do find an issue in the game is as you play it more, those times that you wish you could throw off the pacing, but it's not really built into the game, right? Except with the Wonders, right? Which can only be done a couple times, basically. And so I did feel that after playing it a lot that, yeah, there's just times I wish the pacing wasn't, in a sense, as predictable as you mentioned at 1.2 of being able to count the cards and see who's going to end up kind of taking which ones in a way. Not specific cards, but obviously the pacing at which they go away, right? And so that is kind of a negative on my end. Just kind of the pacing does get predictable, similar to what you were saying. But then that is something that is resolved, somewhat fixed, done better with Seven Wonders Duel Pantheon, the first expansion for the game, which we're not going to talk about or review here, but I just wanted to mention that there is this expansion that came out already a while back now, which I think the main mechanic they would want for it to be about is obviously this extra action of being able to get the blessings from the different gods, which are some kind of bonus at that time. And it has its own little sideboard and god cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay.
The Egyptian Raw card. Yeah, great card.
But then the main thing I would say that the expansion adds is with the god action, a way to throw off the pacing. So it's something that can be done more often, which is kind of what I wanted after playing the base game so much. So yeah, so there's that expansion, and then a second one that's not out yet, but they're actually making it called Agora, which I actually don't know anything about, but you can look that up if you're interested. And so those would be our negatives, right? And then talking about the expansions briefly, and now score and so rating. And one new thing we want to try to do is like John guesses its weight. John guesses your weight.
Yeah. And what do we mean by weight? So basically, every game, right, has different levels of complexity, and we kind of talk about it, and we've talked about it in some games. So what we wanted to do is, as a part of Board Game Geek and community ratings, one of the things they do is also talk about the weight of a game, which is typically the complexity of a game and how
not
easy
physical weight.
Not a physical weight, because there are clearly some games that we clearly rate, like a 10-pounder. But it's more of like the complexity of like how easy is it for somebody to get into the game, pick up the game, or learn the game, right? Or just know how to play the game. The weighting rate scale is 1 through 5 with point. I think it counts the first decimal point.
First two decimals. I think.
The first 2 decimal points.
Yeah.
I'll probably just go to like the first decimal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we just wanted to do that for fun because we were talking about it in some other games separately. So we're like, hey, why don't we do it for the game reviews?
And maybe one time in the future we'll change it to if John guesses it exactly right, he gets a copy of the game.
Yeah, you want to send them over? I'm not opening Board Game Geek on my.
It's like at the carnival, you know, guessing the weight.
But going into the ratings and weight, my rating for this game, I would probably give it for a 2-player game, I'd probably give it a 7.25.
Okay.
I think I enjoy this game. I think it's a good game. I think it's one that if someone were to offer for me to play regularly, I would definitely be more interested in it, and more interested generally speaking than maybe some other games that come up. So it's on the slightly higher than just, to me, 7 is average, like of games that I'm always okay to play, but maybe not, necessarily encouraging all the time. Um, so that's why I give it a 0.25 extra for the game. I think in terms of the weight of the game, I would probably say the weight is around a 1.9, which would be my
Interesting. Okay,
one
so
point.
we're gonna have John guess the weight from now on. I'll guess sometimes because obviously when I'm preparing, I'm opening Board Game Geek, so I might see it already and stuff like that. And then obviously when I reveal my score to you guys at this point, it'll also show the weight. But for me, I will take a guess since I don't think I looked at it this time. I guess the weight is actually around like 2.1, 2.1 or 2.2, something
2
like that.
separately. You made it sound like it's so much different. It's not that far away,
Well, when
man.
you started saying one, I was like, whoa. And then you said 0.9. I was like, okay. But I still would say 2.1. I'll say 2.1. And so now looking at my score, you gave it a 7.25. My
Mm-hmm.
score for Seven Wonders Duel is
9.
8.
8. Wow,
And the
so
weight is
high.
2.22. Oh!
Nice, nice.
And and the reason why this kind of goes into, maybe this will address both things, my guess on the weight and my rating of 8 is,
Mm-hmm.
I think as a 2-player game, it does have a certain complexity to it, more than even if you were to play a lot of lighter multiplayer games, like The Mind, as we've talked about, or we've mentioned Sushi Go. I think there is like quite a bit going on, not hard to learn, but more like things to keep track of while you're playing. And so that's why I would say at least a 2 in the weight, where I think under 2 is more of maybe a single way to win, but then just maybe innovative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then my rating of 8, yes, definitely higher than John's. And I think it makes
Much
a little
higher.
sense considering like the negatives you pointed out versus what I was pointing out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even considering that, maybe people would think I would give it a 7.5, but I do give it an 8 because I think it's one of, I would say, like the more solid 2-player games, like ones that it's one of the ones that I can keep going back to. Um, and especially like if it's someone who uh, is only slightly familiar with drafting, like I'm willing to like teach it and let them kind of experience all the different things going on at the same time. And I think that's kind of a kind of a good feel to the game, that it has quite a bit going on, but it is not too hard to teach. It's mainly kind of getting used to the symbols, which actually would be, going back a little bit, a small negative from me, that there are symbols to get used to, or that ones I even have to look up again when I'm going back to the game. But that's not a big deal because you just look it up again once and then it makes sense. And so, yeah, 8, really, really solid 2-player game in my view. One that I would clearly want to play more than John.
Again, I'm not against playing the game, but yeah, I think this is one of the first times I've been so different from other people from the community rating.
Yeah, so Seven Wonders
To
Duel
say,
is, yeah, as you guys see, 8.1 and also 16 overall of all time,
um, yeah,
right? And number 8 on all strategy games.
mm-hmm.
So a lot of the community does like it. And
So
that
pretty
could
high
be a
up.
big part of people moving onto it from the original Seven Wonders. Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
people felt that was a little too light since it had so many, was open to up to 7 players.
Yep.
But then kind of condensing it down to this 2-player version makes it maybe a little faster, a little more engaging. So yeah, it is definitely high up there on the overall list too. So
I
yeah,
just have a short attention span, so
you need it
for a
even
2-player,
faster.
I
You
need my
just, you
instant
just,
action.
it just has to be a 1-player game then, huh?
I need my 2-player fighting games. I need my, I need my battles. I need my warfare, my conflict, or my cooperative, I guess.
So yeah, so that was 7 Wonders Duel, 7.25 from John and 8 from me. I mean, both still saying it's a good game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you guys are interested, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say check it out. If you played 7 Wonders, the original, I think Duel is better. Just saying that now. And as a lot of the community says, obviously by the ranking. But yeah, if this was helpful, please share this video with your friends. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.